Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the conversation series. I am thrilled today to have the founder and CEO of Be Fearless, the podcast host of an incredible podcast to begin with, Dare to Be Fearless. She's also the owner of Alexa Curtis Consulting. She's been this figure in this community for so long, and I'm so excited to have Alexa Curtis here with me. Alexa, thank you so much for joining me today and letting me jump into your world and your background and everything that you've been doing for the last 10 plus years.
Well, thank you so much from one OG blogger to another. It's great to be here.
We were talking beforehand, and I was telling Alexa, I'm like, when I first started blogging, she was one of the first ones that I started following. So, and that's exactly where I want to start is just that OG blog. Why start that blog? What made you kick into that and just kick off this journey for you?
So I started my blog back in 2011 before blogging was the thing. So it was like really, kind of the OG days of this industry. And at the time I was 12, I came from no money, no connections, had really no friends and was in middle school. And so I just Googled one day. My sister actually gave me the idea. I love to write. I always knew I was really good on camera. And she was like, why don't you just start a blog? And so I literally just Googled it and there was a blogger.com. I don't even think it exists anymore. And I just made this account and it was called A Life in the Fashion Lane. And for essentially, I think like first 1, 2 year, I was just doing fashion posts with any clothing I could get my hands on. And it was all bad quality and grammatically incorrect, but it essentially turned into being this career path that I followed from that original blog.
I love it. I love it because it's so funny when you go back and look at it, like blogs that you follow today. You're like the evolution of how everybody's blogs have updated and changed how they look and feel and what they talk about. It's kind of been the most fascinating thing for me, this evolution of how, like you were saying, 2011, when blogging was just not, that wasn't the kickoff yet to all of this. But then we get farther down the line and we're like, okay, people are really, this is really starting to become a thing.
Yeah, and you even have Squarespace that makes it so easy to just do this overnight. Whereas back then, I mean, there was no Squarespace that I remember, so there was no easy way to almost do it. You were just kind of following the motions of figuring out how to do it, and now it's almost like there's a tool, all these tools to make it to a career.
And now we get into to be fearless and this I want to say movement because it truly is in my eyes a movement that I love that you've got the newsletter that goes out every single week, which is incredible. I'm like, it's like the kick in the butt every single week, and you're like, yes, here we go.
That makes
But you've also got the summit that you were doing as well. I just want to start off with why a summit? Why go do something so massive like that?
I have no idea because I'm insane. So I had this idea in 2018 and I had just signed with Disney, and so I really kind of started it while I was at Disney, and I pitched it out for a year and I had made a media kit and there was no bites on this. There was no bites on this idea. And then I ended up going to this conference in Pennsylvania, and when I was there, I ended up meeting somebody and she worked at Drexel and she was like, we would be interested in this. We'll give you the space. And I was like, great. And my literal intention, I'd barely ever been to a proper conference in that way. I mean, I'd maybe been to 2 or 3. And so I was like, I'm just going to call essentially successful people that I know and just be like, hey, come and speak. And it ended up transpiring into this very large scale event with sponsors like Shake Shack and Hulu and Netflix. I mean, I got all of them just by cold pitching. And so I learned a lot, and there was a lot of things I would have done differently, but the response from students was so engaging that my gut was like, you need to keep doing this. And so over the next 3 years or 4 years, and then post Disney, I was able to scale it and start getting colleges and universities to buy into it. And then in April, I did the first one that wasn't college affiliated, and that's kind of the model now. So my plan is to have another one also in November of this year. But I think community is such a buzzword. But as you mentioned earlier, I mean, I have realized that I think being fearless has become a movement. And I think to just rely on the internet to keep it going, it just doesn't have the same effect to me that it does when I'm able to face have a conversation with somebody and actually hear about things that they're going through and how they want to pursue entrepreneurship and whatnot.
And what I love that you just said too, because I've been having conversations with people about community being a buzzword, and now it's become, in my eyes, like people are referring it to almost as like the same sense of networking, where I'm like, it's that buzzword now. But I think it just depends on how you use it in the sense of truly bringing people together or finding your people.
It's become a buzzword and it's become something that everyone wants to build or create. And I'm not quite sure why. I mean, obviously, building community is great, but I don't think people realize that you really can't scale community. There's thousands of free communities out there. So I think I almost find that like content creation, that buzzword or influencer has now become the buzzword of community, but it all ties into everything under that umbrella being incredibly hard to monetize, incredibly hard to scale. So I did a podcast yesterday and I said, looking back, or if I were to give somebody advice now, I would say create a role at a company, go to a Strava, go to a Canva and a Beehive, a newly backed VC backed company and create a role where you can go in and build their community, build their Slack or their Telegram or their Discord. And then you really know how to go and scale one on your own versus just thinking because you have X amount of followers on social media, that means people are going to want to engage with you on a daily basis or, come to your events. It doesn't mean that. And so you have to really find that niche of what the definition of how you define community, what that really is.
Yes, absolutely. I want to go back to the summit real quick and just ask you, like, I was lucky enough that I was able to put together a live audience recording for the 100th episode, and leading up to that I was more stressed out than I have ever been in my entire life. If building and putting together a summit in the size that you have with vendors, sponsors, all of these things, what's the stress level for you in the sense of having to put all this together? Like, what is that like for you in just trying to do your daily life and job as well?
Such an interesting question because I don't really know how to answer that. I mean, I will definitely say that unfortunately I exist on a very high stress fit like level. And I would say there's days where it's out of control and my anxiety is just like I can't control it. But I also find that I'm able to channel that into my work ethic,
Yeah.
which is a good thing and also a really negative thing. I mean, like baseline for me, working out, therapy, going on a walk. I mean, those are things that I've gotten a lot better at, including in my day to day. I also find that as got into my late 20s, I'm 26. I do have moments like even yesterday, I was at lunch with a friend of mine and she's 32 and she was like, do you want kids? Do you want to get married? And I'm like, I have never been so laser focused and career focused in my life where it's hard to think of those questions. But all I know the answer to is if I was able to achieve a certain amount of financial success, then yes, I think that is thing. And I think that when you have those thoughts of like the future,
Yeah.
I don't think this whole hustle culture and the career, it's amazing. But like, is that really why you're on this planet? Is to like work 24-hour days and build this business and make a lot of money and like that's it? Having a family or
Yeah.
actually seeing parts of the world. I mean, that's so much more important. So I have to, in those moments where I can't handle the stress, really kind of check myself and be like, this is just one moment, right? Like, and I'm choosing to put myself in this position instead of like, I can go relax or have a more chilled day or whatever.
I'm so glad you said that. I'm 27 and I love what I do. I love getting to travel. I love my job that I get to go to conferences and cover social media and things like that. And I love getting to be in this venue of podcasting. But I constantly get the question, I'm like, do you want to have kids? Like, shouldn't you be dating? Things like that. I'm like, it's just sometimes it's not at the top of my mind that I'm like, to go out somewhere. I'm like, I just love what I do. And so, like you said, I'm like, I do have to check myself sometimes, but I'm like, I love getting to be in the venues that I am in.
Yeah. And I don't think, I mean, at that age, you don't need to think of those things. I think it's just natural that people ask that. And of course, if you're doing something more non-traditional, like it seems like you are, like what I've done, it's more confusing to somebody to try and understand the trajectory of your life, because there really isn't any trajectory, right? Like it could go any way at any given time, versus somebody who works for a corporate company, makes good money, has a kid, has a family, and then this is just not that kind of lifestyle. So I definitely don't think there's any rush. I think being obsessed with your career, I mean, it's the best thing that I could have, because it's gotten me through so much, and it's also made me care so little about opinions of others. I think it's helped me date better as I've gotten older, because I value something so much. And I feel like when you value something so much, all of the BS or criticism or rejection just doesn't phase you that much, because you're so focused on this other thing that's kind of your baby. Like that's your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever.
Yes, it doesn't bug you as much to get those questions. It's just like, I'm enjoying life right now. I'm doing what I'm doing and I love it. So I totally resonate with that. I want to hit on the cold pitches that you were talking about when you were first putting together the first summit. Cold pitches to Hulu, for God's sakes, and getting them to be able to come on. I just want to hit on, because you've talked about this so much on your LinkedIn and other forums, like some of the strategies that you have that go into some of these pitches and what that looks like. I'm so interested when I'm setting a pitch to people. I'm like, I have no idea sometimes what's important to put in a pitch and what's not. What it goes through that your mind with that.
There's so much to unpack there. I'll say I won't tell you how I used to pitch, because there was no strategy.
Okay.
Uh, so I will tell you now how I pitch, because I've actually figured out how to properly do it. I mean,
Okay.
probably most likely that idea behind Be Fearless was rejected for a year, because I probably was pitching it wrong. I had no like lead funnel. I had no way to essentially, I always wanted things very fast. And
Yes.
so I would just move on instead of almost cultivating this relationship. So I would say for now, if you want to pitch a podcast sponsorship or whatnot, I've really realized the value of LinkedIn. So now what I do is I find, say, every Monday morning, 10, 20 companies I want to pitch that week. I'll
Okay.
ask ChatGPT, give me recently VC backed companies in finance or health, those particular areas and niches. If you have a podcast or business like mine that focuses on entrepreneurship or tech, they have a lot of money. I don't frequently pitch like a Walmart or a Target. I wouldn't necessarily pitch a someone at Skims or like Good American, because they don't really need me. I would be totally open to working with them, but I don't really find that they would probably reply to me at this stage of where I am. And so, number one, finding those startup companies where you can go in and say, either let me create content for you for your platforms, because it's cheaper than you hiring somebody full time to do it. And then you can upsell them on your own pages. And then second of all, with a media kit or a one sheet, you don't want to include, stats on there that are like really low. So if you have a Facebook page and an Instagram and a TikTok, and your Facebook page has 20 followers, just there's like no reason to put in there that. You always want to lead with really where your focus is. Obviously, if you have a website or a podcast, something like that, it really shows that you, I think, are more in tune with your community, that you may have an element of a cult following if you don't have millions of followers, compared to somebody who's just I hate the word. I don't even want to say, I'm going to say the word micro influencer, but I hate that word. So I'm not going to use it in comparison to somebody who has less following than like multi-million, people
Yes.
following them. Um, so you may have that cult following if you have the podcast and whatnot. And so you always want to lead with that too in your pitch.
Okay. It's so interesting because you can talk to so many different people who are in public relations or PR, and you ask them that question, they will give you a million different answers of what is important to put in there. And I'm like, I don't know how to keep track of all this. I don't know how to combine all these things or what to do. But I love that you are working with ChatGPT as well and going in there, because I think everybody has this like purview on chat gpt and ai right now. They're like, oh my god, people are using it and that's what they're doing. I'm like, no, you can create like a template and
Yeah.
then go and use it to your benefit. So you're not having to always create something from scratch and be doing so much work, but you can use it as a tool to be able to say, guide you in a way. So I love that you called that out.
Yeah, and I actually don't use it. Like I really only use GPT for rewriting something. Like sometimes I'll put
Yeah.
out a tweet and I'll be like, this doesn't make sense, so rewrite this for me, or find me companies that are recently backed. I really use it for that. And then I'll probably use it to like come up with a pitch template. Like I just sent over a proposal to Wix and I said like, here's what I want to include, write this, and then I'll go through and I'll edit it. So really, actually, those are only the three things I use it for. I can't think of anything much else I use it for. Sometimes like coming up with names. Like I just started another company last week, and so I kind of use it to come up with a name,
Yeah.
but I don't use it too often aside from pitching brands.
I love that you said the rewrite too, because I'm like, I'll sometimes be writing something for social. I'm like, this just doesn't sound right to me. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah. Same. Literally all the time. I literally just tweeted something and I was too lazy to put it in GPT, and then I reread it and was like, does this make sense? And I was like, probably not, but like maybe people will get the gist. I'm
I
not in
love
the
it.
mood.
I too. I'm like, and well, and sometimes I do it. I'm like, okay, I have super long. I'm like, I need to get down to the 280 characters for Twitter,
Yes.
and that's
That's
what I use
also
it for as
great.
well. Yeah.
Yes, that's also super, super great to use it for, is things like that.
I'm like, shrink this for me just a little bit, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to get to one of your other titles, former Disney host. You had a variety of things that you were doing with Disney. One was the radio show, or the Radio Disney show, host of Fearless Every Day. But then you were also doing the host of Fearless on Localish. What was that like? Just first of all, working with Disney and getting these shows created with them that kind of led to your podcast and things like that.
Well, it was crazy. It was amazing. There's so much in that question because it was such an interesting experience. I mean, from the way that I got the show to the original conversations I had with them, to the negotiation process, to the actual production of that show, to then leaving and getting another show. So I don't even know where to start in that, but I don't even where should I start in that?
Yeah, what was the kickoff to first just get Fearless Every Day on Radio Disney?
So I was living in Boston and I had found this producer list online, and
Ooh.
I actually sell this list that I've gone through and like edited a lot of the emails of, but it was a producer list that essentially had everyone at MTV, Hulu, Netflix, the same people who had spoken at the Be Fearless Summit, all of the executives, everyone from MTV. And I literally did a BCC. I emailed every single person. And so that's why I'm like, I can give you what I used to do, but I would never tell somebody now BCC people. I think it goes to show that I really had no expectation anyone would reply to my email. And I think about a week later, I got a response from, at the time, the VP's name was Phil, and his assistant, Angela, emailed me and was like, Phil received your email and is curious about you. And if you live in LA, would like to take a meeting. And within 3 days, literally, I subletted my Boston apartment. I packed up all of my stuff and I rented an apartment from Facebook in LA. And I knew that if I said I didn't live there, that I think you really get one chance with those kind of people. And I took a leap and I did it, and I was out there and it was very lonely. And within that, like, first 6 months is about when I got the yes for that show.
Okay. That's a long 6 months to be. And is that just like sitting down and working through just even concepting, or is that just a going back and forth through negotiations and just trying to figure out if it was the right fit?
There's actually it was actually longer than 6 months. So what actually ended up happening is I had a few, it was all very serendipitous. I had a meeting with them, and then I was in this LA apartment and I got a phone call on a blocked number from an agent. And I hate spam, I hate scam calls, whatever. So I picked up the phone and I was just like, honestly, like the biggest bitch. I was like, hello, like literally, like, who the fuck is this? And on the other line was an agent from my management company that ended up being my manager. And this woman's name was Anne. I have no idea who she is, but I come to find out that like her daughter I had apparently sent an email to RMG, Rain Management Group, which was who ended
Right.
up being my agent, about a year before. And for whatever reason, the partner at this firm, there's like in Hollywood, you have like WME and CAA and UTA. It's what they call kind of like the top 10. And RMG was one of the top 10. I had apparently sent an email to RMG a year prior, and this partner's daughter was going through the mom's email, Anne,
Mm.
and apparently saw my email and was like, Mom, why didn't you reply to this girl? She's so cool. And so I'm like, Anne, I'm like, okay. And she's like, from Rain Management, like, we got your email. And I was like, I freaking out because I'm like, oh my God. And then I'm like, wait, I wrote an email. I'm like, okay. So anyhow, they were like, you should come in for a meeting and meet with our other talent manager. And I was like, this is great timing because I have an opportunity at Disney and I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I went and I met with them the next week, and I ended up getting picked up by them. And my manager was a manager who had managed a lot of talent at Disney. So she was very well aware of that world and the legal side behind it. So, like, that part I had nailed down. So essentially, Eileen, who was my manager, and I would meet like every other day, and we would just kind of come up with what we wanted to pitch to Disney. They really left the door open, but they said the fearless concept really resonated with them. So I think that was maybe in September or October. In March, they said yes.
Okay.
4 weeks after saying yes, I was in Arizona for a conference and get a call from Eileen that was just freaking out because it was traumatic. I remember Disney, I had a YouTube series called Sex Ed for Teens when I was living in Boston, where I would educate kids about sex ed, like nothing racy, none of my own personal
Got it.
experiences. So they pulled out of the show, and no one really knows this story. And it was just my own personal hell. Like, I remember the minute getting the phone call, and what ended up transpiring is from that March to June. So actually, I think there was about a year in there. From that 6-month period, they didn't reply to any emails. We got an email from legal that was like, we found a YouTube series where Alexa talks about sex, and we unfortunately cannot have her in the Disney family. Like, we wish her the best of luck. It was your worst nightmare that happened. I mean, I lost it. I was suicidal half the time. I was depressed half the time. I thought I was losing my mind.
Yeah.
Ended up going to visit my sister and my nephews for I think like a month or two.
Okay.
Land back in LA, and at 8 a.m., this is now 6 months later after them saying
Yeah.
no, they just ghosted us. Get a phone call from Eileen, and no, actually, it wasn't a phone call. I was in an Uber heading to a meeting with someone she was trying to introduce me to essentially like see if there was other opportunities for me anywhere. And it just said, fuck yes, you got the show. And I just was like, what? I remember I'm in an Uber, I'm screaming. I'm like, because I'm like, this besides, I don't understand. She ends up calling me and is like, Disney called. They were so busy, they just couldn't reply to the email, but you got the show. Like, they're sending over a contract next week. Cause I obviously deleted all of these videos.
Yes.
So that's a very long story, but like looking back, it taught me so much about how to be resilient because it was just this eye-opening opportunity. And then we started producing that show in August. So 2 months after that contract was signed.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
That
When I
is
think about it,
absolutely
like, oh my
crazy.
God, that was so insane. Yeah.
Is it
It was
like
rough.
did that shit really just happen? Kind of like just thinking about it right now, like did that really?
Yeah, because I even remember like looking at my phone and you get this message, and also from like the management side, I'm a young entrepreneur, right? Like, I'm doing this all on my own, no money, no connections, and I fucked it all up. Like,
Yeah.
why was I trying to do something good with having those videos out there, and I'm the one that did this? So I feel I've now disappointed my manager because she's not now representing me at Disney. She's
Yeah.
taken a chance on me for a year to have me, you know, my parents just like it was awful. But I remember like the feeling of being in the car and seeing that text, and the just like the fuck yes, you got the
Yeah.
show. And your whole world almost just like flips upside down in this other way.
Yeah.
And again, I just go back to like looking back at just what I put myself through in that 6-month period. I mean, the anger that I had and the depression that I went through, and how simple it was for a company, of course, like Disney, like they didn't need to reply to the email. Like, the VP was busy. They're just busy. they're not in the market of like trying to appeal to everyone. So I put myself through hell because I couldn't believe I had made that error, but it ended up working out.
And now we jump forward to Dare to Be Fearless podcast, which like I said at the beginning, I absolutely love this podcast because I love the people who you talk to and the topics you talk about. I think this world of entrepreneurship is so vast and large that there are so many things that you can dig into, especially in this startup world. I first want to just dive into what inspired you to start this. What was the kind of kickoff there?
So I had actually started a podcast like back when like Rogan came out, when Caller Daddy had just started, called This Is Life Unfiltered. When
Yeah.
I think I was just finishing high school or something, and I had two different co-hosts. And that is actually the show that I think got me in the door with Disney because they were able to see that I had this experience hosting. And so I started that original podcast back in the day. Then I stopped it while I was at Disney because I couldn't handle doing both shows. Then I left Disney and I don't know, I just didn't know that I had it in me anymore. Like I had done radio, which was essentially a podcast with that network for a year. I didn't find my heart in podcasting anymore. And so then I ended up starting this one called The New Unfiltered. And it was like off and on throughout COVID. And then I can't remember why, but I would say probably like a year ago, I kind of got my groove back with it. And then I recently changed the name to Dare to Be Fearless. But, if you scroll through, I mean, there's hundreds of episodes
Yeah.
from all that same feed, just the name has changed. But I think there's definitely been an evolution with the show as I've progressed in my career. And there's
Yeah.
more personal episodes on there and more founder driven ones. As I've obviously gotten my name out there more, I've been able to have larger guests on, which has been really cool. And so now that's pretty much my focus.
And why specifically startups in that world?
It's what I'm interested in. Like I love, I do the content creation and the influencer side of things, but I wouldn't say it's not my love, like the one-on-one conversations and the actually working with startups. I'm fascinated by it. I would say I'm actually obsessed and infatuated by startups and entrepreneurship. And so to me, at Disney, it was like a very celebrity driven show and very kid driven, but I think there's something so unique and so rare about entrepreneurs. And so it's like it's what interests me. So it's just the only thing that I feel like I can really walk away from an episode and learn something, but also be able to give my 2 cents on from my experience being an entrepreneur.
And fearless is really what kind of wraps everything that you do up. Why the word fearless in all of this?
So interesting, actually. I had I can't remember if I had already started doing it, but when I was living in Boston, I think I had started this thing called Fearless Fridays. And
Okay.
every Friday I would do something, yeah, that was just like fearless, like skydiving or uh surfing or whatever. And so when I moved to LA and I started meeting with my manager at the time and we spoke to Disney, she and I had a meeting and she was like, "What word do you think defines you?" And she actually, I think, was the one. I remember where we were at a lunch and she was like, "I feel like you're pretty fearless." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." And we kind of just let it from there. And so I think then when I do remember Disney being like, you need to come back to us with certain ideas, which is also very anxiety provoking. Because, of course, if I come up with 3 ideas and they're like, no, they're not going to keep being like, come back, come back.
Yep.
And so one of the ideas I presented was, look, I've done this Fearless Fridays thing. It really resonates with people. And that really, there's like 10, 15 executives in one room when you're trying to pitch something. And I just remember them all being like, we really like that. But because you've already done Fearless Fridays, we can't use that name. So why don't we call it Fearless Every Day? And I was like, okay. And that was really just it.
I love it. I love that because I don't think it's a word that's used quite often like you have it being used. And so I love that it's almost like a push outside the box for people sometimes when they're kind of jumping into this. So I love that you use that word fearless.
Yeah.
On top of everything else that you have done and have been doing, you've got Alexa Curtis Consulting. Why go and start this branch of things on top of everything else you're doing with Be Fearless, the podcast, all of that?
So I've always kind of been consulting. Like I do a lot of coaching for founders. I mean, a lot of that is pretty much what I do in a day. Like I'm not somebody who sits here and takes TikTok videos all day. Like, I mean, I literally spend probably an hour of my day on the content thing. And so I'm actually now restarting that side of things with a ex VP at LinkedIn, and our focus is LinkedIn, but I haven't updated really anything online about it. But I've been having a lot of conversations with companies about working with them on these particular webinars and seminars in person. But it's the same thing of like I love working with the startups. And so I really find that at this point, I'm able to call myself an expert in that space of launching or scaling a podcast or a newsletter or building a personal brand online. And so to me, it's something that I really enjoy doing. Obviously, it's additional revenue. And if you're working with a really cool company, I really like to be able to see that a lot of these founders are not necessarily like me. Like I definitely think I'm very lucky in the sense of the business side of things, but also being on camera is something I'm incredibly good at. And I have that just naturally in me. Like 99% of founders are not like that. And
Yes.
so I've kind of found this niche of founders, especially people in tech and AI. They're like, I don't even know how to post on Instagram.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is like what I know so well. And I'm able to kind of come in with a lot of them and be like, this is really how to strategize behind expanding your presence on those platforms that you don't know how to use.
Yep. I love that you bring up like the being good in front of camera too, because I think it's as I've been able to work with people inside the company that I work for, like it's amazing the amount of people who truly like get so nervous when like are great speakers, but that camera comes out and they're like,
Yeah.
I have no like I've got nothing for you.
Yeah, and I guess when I look at it from like a third person perspective, I mean, it's quite odd. Like, why would anyone want to essentially film themselves or, be on front of a camera? It's very different than having a face to face conversation. So it makes a lot of sense. But I really believe the same with entrepreneurship. Some people just have it and some people don't. And I would say I believe similar things with that ability to be as easy to talk to as somebody like you, versus somebody I've been interviewed on other podcasts and just some hosts just are not really super good. And of course, I give everyone so much credit, but you can just tell when somebody's like good at talking to somebody.
Yes.
It's
Well,
just kind of like you have that or you don't.
absolutely. And I've had it with guests as well. I'm like I get into this and I'm like, "Oh, this is going to we're going to have to pull some teeth here. We're going to have to pull some things to get us out of to get things out of this conversation," which sometimes makes it as you know, it makes it harder for these conversations to be
Yeah.
as free flowing as you want them to be or as open as you want them to be.
I had probably the worst interview of my whole career a few weeks ago in New York, and I don't know how I did not see this coming, but this guest in part I mean, yeah, it was bad. It was really, really bad. But again, that's again, your ability as the host has to be able to pull that stuff out of people, and sometimes people just won't give it to you, and then sometimes you just have to be like, "This just sucked. Episode just sucked." But
Yeah.
that's it, right? Like, if you can talk to 99 people who are incredible at having a conversation and 1% sucks, all right, well, that's fine.
Yes. Are there things that you're hoping your audience are walking away from this podcast and are hoping that they're taken away with them, that they're learning, that they're saying, "Oh shit, I can go do this myself. I can really go and kick my own passion and my own thing off."
I'm gonna take that question and ask people it on my podcast because I really like it. Yeah, I mean, I think the Disney story is incredible. If I was listening to a founder, and I mean, I interview entrepreneurs now for a living, so when I have conversations like that with them off camera, I'm able to just see the highs and the lows and the grit that's required to pursue this path, and that really inspires me. So I would hope that those trials and tribulations inspire somebody else to get through that up and down. So I would say, the story of just how that transpired, hopefully, and I loved what you asked about the cold pitching, the strategy that I have behind using LinkedIn and getting in front of those brands and what to include in a media kit and a one sheet. If you want to pursue this kind of career is obviously very important in the way that you get in front of those people and those brands.
Okay, I gotta ask you about this newsletter because I've been learning so much from you about this newsletter, and it's become such a thing too, whether it be email or even LinkedIn newsletters have become such a massive thing now. Why is it important for someone to go start a newsletter?
I think it's very important for anyone to have a newsletter because a lot of people rely 100% on social media to start a company. And in any day and time, like TikTok can go away, Instagram can go away. But what won't go away is a newsletter, right? Is email. What won't go away is your ability to have another place that you can sell a product to. And so it's very important whether you're in B2B business or B2C, or you're just a content creator. And I also think it's another place that brands want to put their money. The same thing with a podcast is anyone who's opening that newsletter obviously is a fan of this person more than just scrolling through a page and being like, "Oh, cool video, let me like it." And so they're, I think, more willing to engage and purchase items that you may include in a newsletter. And but of course, newsletters are like a run club. Like if you hate running, why would you go run? If you hate writing, why would you write a newsletter?
Yes.
So if you don't like to write, I don't know why you would do it. But if you have a company that's a product-based company like a candle or a notebook, then you can hire somebody to do that for you, so you're still able to create another form of communication with your customer.
What does your team look like today? How many people do you have working with you? What is the makeup of Alexa Curtis's team look like?
So I have somebody that I have hired who does help with the newsletter. So she's been incredible. She essentially, like, her and I talk at the beginning of the week and go over what we want in the newsletter, and then I kind of like send her bullet points. She writes the whole thing, then I go through and like rewrite it in my tone.
Yeah.
She's amazing. I have one part-time employee, Anna, who's been with me like since the beginning. She is incredible. She does like a lot more podcast outreach, like finding guests. She reaches out to brands. Like this week, she's been finding brands and speakers for this upcoming summit. I just have an assistant, which doesn't he doesn't really do anything that's that fun. And then I hire a lot of like freelancers more often. So with like the summit, I mean, I usually end up hiring 2 to 3 people for planning a summit that come on just with that timeline of the summit to help with finding the speakers, then help with organizing the space and setting up the place and coming up with the schedule so that I can really ideally, like, I just approve things or be like, I don't like that, fix it, find me somebody else.
Yeah.
um, and then, I mean, with the podcast, I do all the editing for that. I don't edit the video, but I edit all the audio.
Love it. I've been able to learn so much from you. And one of the things that really, when I was on LinkedIn last week, I'm on LinkedIn like 24/7 these days. But one of the things that I love that you spoke about is rejection. And especially in the space that you and I are in, when it comes to podcast guests that you really want to have on, but they come back and say no, or maybe it's just not the right time, or just pure rejection from these bigger companies or VCs. What is like, how do you deal with that rejection? How do you kind of get through that and say, don't give up, keep going, there's other things out there?
Well, I will say that every time, ideally, if you're reaching out to 20 new people and you can almost guarantee that like one of them will say yes to you, it makes it easier when somebody says no to you. Um, so like every time I'm rejected, if I can then go and do even something simple, like try and find a product or a guest or something that I know will say yes, I think it takes away that annoyance of when you're rejected. Do I think it ever really gets easier? Not really, but do I think you get stronger? Yeah. I think at this stage in my career, I mean, I'm rejected quite heavily now, not for any specific reason, but I would say I pitch a lot of the time. And I look forward to the day that they're like calling me up, like, wow. And I get to be like, nope, my turn. Because I think a lot of the times when I'm rejected, it's very tedious, stupid shit, to be honest. And I think you can't take it personally, but it's hard not to. And that's why I have my toes, I think, dipped in other areas, is because think at the end of the day, to try and rely on any platform to amass this massive following, which is where a lot of brands obviously want to put their dollars behind, people who have 40,000 downloads per episode on a podcast. It's like there are even celebrities that don't even have that. And so I don't ever want to be chasing something that may get there or may not, which is why I'm so involved in like the startup world in general, because there's so much more than like a brand just being like, oh, well, you don't have enough clicks, we're not going to pay you, but like, let's do an affiliate program. To be honest, like,
Yeah.
fuck that. Like, fuck
Yeah.
that. You want to work for free? Like, would you call your boss and ask them if you could go into work for free that day? And I just, so that's my new mentality. Of course, I would never say that to somebody, but when I get those emails, and I get them often, that's my thought process, is like, you go work for free, like try it, enjoy it, and then get back to me about your fucking affiliate program. It's a very harsh way to go about it, but like, that's what I'm sick of, the affiliate stuff. I think it is so pathetic, and it's always like, you don't have enough views or whatever the fuck they say, but like, let's do an affiliate. And I'm like, how about no? Like, go find somebody who is nowhere near where I am in my career and have them do an affiliate because they actually need to do it. I
Yeah.
did that stuff for years when I was 12, 13, 14, free product. Like, how am I going to pay my rent with a granola bar for free?
Yeah. No, that
You
doesn't.
know?
No, no, but I love that you say that though, because I think we so heavily rely on numbers instead of
Yeah.
the actual quality of the content that is being produced. And I think we saw it during COVID. I'm like, we relied so heavily at one point at having a blue check mark next to our names. And people then just started going and buying the blue check mark. I'm like, this is bullshit. It's bullshit. Because now
Yeah.
the people who are that were striving to get to the 30,000 that Instagram was making us march towards are like, screw this. I'm done. I don't care anymore about any of this stuff. Why does it matter anymore what the numbers are?
Yeah, and I mean, there's a sense of it, like, I get it, right? Of course, if you have to, because at the end of the day, it's sales, right? So if you are working with a creator, you have to go and get this approved by your boss, and you're going to be in trouble if this person doesn't get you any sales from this product that you're plugging in their thing. So I get having to be strategic about it, but I also find that people there's so much judgment based on that one number that I don't even think people sometimes go to the next step of being like, wait, who actually is this person? Because they're like, oh, she's nobody because she has 5,000 followers on whatever, right? And so, I mean, the brands that I've worked with are like, there's never been a question like that. They're highly engaged people. I have a highly engaged audience. I've been able to perform very well in those partnerships. And, unfortunately, you just have to find those brands a little bit harder than somebody. But then there's the other side, it's like, people buy these followers, right? And so they still may get no traction from the brand side, but it's all just a bit of a rat race. And so you have to really stay above that noise.
100%. 100%. Alexa, my last question for you is just what continues to drive your passion and your love for what you do on a daily basis and be fearless and everything?
Well, my number one thing is, I mean, I love like to help people. I think if I can take this story and this life and this path that I built for myself and it can impact somebody to follow in it. I didn't have that growing up. I didn't have anyone showing me the way or telling me how hard it was going to be if you do something different with your life. So if those ups and downs can inspire someone, that's number one. And I think the one-to-one conversations or the in-person things, I mean, that's also being able to hear people's stories in that way is awesome. And then second of all, I mean, I love business. I think this industry of business is incredible. I think the world of startups is fascinating. And I think what people can achieve just by taking a risk on themselves is mesmerizing in comparison to where most people stay in the safe zone. And I don't live like that. And so I don't think there's any other world or industry I could live in that applauds my fearlessness in the way that the business world does, because you have to be ruthless, you have to be resilient, you have to have grit.
Yep.
And most people don't have that.
I love it, and it's risk scares people. Risk is a scary thing that a lot of people don't want to step outside that box and enter risk because the the fate of what will come from it is just a little too daunting for a lot of people.
Rightfully so. It's terrifying. If I could do anything else, it would not be this. But now I'm like trapped in it. Now I have to be like, I have to keep going because I want to see where it ends up. But yes,
Yeah.
it's terrifying. So
Yeah.
there's no reason to like follow this path
Yeah.
unless you really want to.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Miss Alexa Curtis. Alexa, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your story and letting me dig into your world and all the things that you are doing.
Thank you so much for having me and for being such a good host. You really are
Thank
quite
you.
good at this. So I'm impressed.
Thank you. That is high praise coming from you. So I really, really appreciate it. But you guys, all of Alexa's social is going to be linked down below: podcast, website, social media, where you can find her everywhere. And Alexa, I can't wait to hear more about the Be Fearless Summit in November. And I can't wait to see how it goes.
Thank you so much.
Yes. And as always, I will see you guys back here next time. Bye, y'all.